Welcome y'all. In today's N8n tutorial, I want to show you a little bit about how to write expressions. We touched a little bit on this in the last lesson, but I'd like to take a deep dive into it. Before we do anything else, let's go ahead and execute this workflow. All right, perfect. Now you can see this little source data node. These are actually called edit fields nodes that we're using right now. Nice little thing. You can go ahead and rename them by going up here in the top left corner, rename the node. So if I wanted to name this edit fields, since, it is an edit fields node, we can go ahead and see it is now called edit fields in the work. Now for our data, we see we have a lead here. Her name is Alice. Her age is 30. She is active. Good. Skills are JavaScript, Python, and then the projects is actually an array. Look at that. This touches on what we learned in last episode where we learned about the basics of JSON code. An array is kind of a series of objects that are all nested under one. So you can see, for example, skills is a pretty simple array here where it just has JavaScript, Python, and N8n all listed here. Projects is a little more complex where it has the names of where it has the names and statuses of two different projects. And we've also got contact information down here where we have an email and the phone number is null. This is the main reason that null is going to be a much more valuable data type than you might suppose, is because sometimes we're going to have times that we need it. For example, let's say we were tracking a bunch of different leads this way, and then we would want to be able to use null to fill in fields that apply to some leads and not to others. So, say we don't have the phone numbers of every lead we put in our sheet. Well, we don't have to ignore those leads. We can still put the data in and just mark their phone number as null. Now let's look at the basics here, and you see this is an expression. It points to the edit fields node, so that one that we were looking at just now, and it looks at a field within the edit fields node called name. And you can see that the name field from the edit fields node has Alice in it. So that's why it shows Alice in our output. Now, what if we wanted to do the exact same thing, but it wasn't set up for us? What would we do? We would actually just go ahead and click and drag it like that. And you see the expression is a bit simpler this time. That's because technically you don't actually have to name the node if the node comes immediately before this one. But yeah, that's why I like the 3 different data views, and those are accessible on input and output. So if I needed to see the output as a schema, there we have it. In fact, let's execute the step again and see it has Alice once more. You can also preview what it would map to in this particular instance by looking right down here. So we can see it's Alice. We're good. N8n selectors are also really handy. Let's go ahead and execute the step and see this dot last here. That is a selector within the expression. So if we had a last name that came in along with it, perhaps as a subset or something of that nature, then we'd be able to point at it with this specific part of the expression, N8n selectors. Now, if we're working with an item in a list or an array, it's going to be a little more involved. See, we are now using the skills 1 selector. So this is going to target the first item in the skills array. So let's go ahead and hit execute step and look at that. We should actually label that as the first one in the list. But if we go to edit fields and look at this, I was wrong. See, when we use the square brackets in a selector, it is because it's referring to an array and we want to point at a specific item within that array. So in this case, since arrays start at 0 when they're counting the items, I know it's a little weird. 1 is actually pointing at the second item in the skills array. Now we can see on the input, skills 1 is Python, and in the output, we are now outputting a second skill that's Python. Perfect. This is exactly what we want to see. And of course, same thing is still true. We can just click and drag from the schema view of the data. And now we can see execute step. Look at that. It outputs Python. Well, okay. So this is interesting. Okay. So now what happens if we want to reference an object that is inside of yet another object? In this example, we are catching the email from within the contact object. Pretty simple. We just use the dot contact as a selector and then the dot email as a selector within that. See how that works? You can also see how that's going to map if the node has input data. So if we hit execute step, we should see, yep, it pops out as alice@example.com. Make sense? Awesome. Now, what happens if we want to access data that is within an array of objects? So in this example, we want to catch the status of the first project. So look at this. We're gonna go through this. The status of project 0 is done, and we want to catch that status right here. So we use dot project 0. That's our selector, and then we use dot status after that to specify, yep, its status is the object within the array that we want to reference. Not name, not the whole project. We want status. And you can see that maps correctly in the result. So we're going to go ahead and hit execute step. Beautiful. Okay, now we're doing a little more than just passing the data. We want to actually transform it. We want to do something with it that changes its appearance and how it will behave in scenarios going forward. If we want to transform the text, we could use a function thing like to uppercase. Most LLMs know how to do this, by the way. So if there's anything that you're not sure about when you're trying to write an expression, you can just go and ask ChatGPT, hey, write this expression. This is what I want it to do. And it is pretty good at that. If you want it to do math, you can do math with it. Just head it with math and then divide it by 7 or whatever it is you want to do. You can also retrieve the data type. So if you remember from the last lesson, there's a couple of different types of data that it could go by. For example, number or string or Boolean. It's going to output that type of data. So in this example, you can see we just want to put the name of our lead in all caps, and it outputs the name of our lead in all caps. This one divides the age by 7. So we've got our age divided by 7. And for the data type of the age, of course, it is a number data type, so that's what it's going to output. Let's go ahead and run it and see if everything comes out correctly. It looks like it has. Perfect. Now, what happens if you have an object, but you don't know what's inside it? You use object.keys. Now, what that's going to do is grab the key names that are within a certain object. So in this case, we're using .contact again. So we want to get the names of the keys, not the names of the values. We want the names of the keys that are in contact. So if we go ahead and hit execute step, look at that. We have contact keys 0 and contact keys 1. That is email and phone. Now, what happens if you want to convert a JSON object back into a string? Well, you can actually use json.stringify. So in this example, we're using json.stringify and we're looking at the edit fields contact, and that's going to give us the email and the phone number. See, pretty simple. And it's no longer inside of its JSON body. It's kind of extracted out. See, there we go. Contact as string, email alice.com, and then phone number. Now, what if a node outputs a bunch of items and you want to summarize them? Then you use $items. So now we want to get a single comma separated string of all the user's skills. Okay, makes sense? Now, how are we going to do that? We're going to use this split out node, and we want to split out skills. Now, you actually want to switch this to expression mode because, as you can see, I had to switch it from the regular skills plain text. So here, let me show you exactly what this looked like. Skills. Now, what's wrong with this? Anybody? The problem is it doesn't refer to anything. So that's why we actually want to switch it to expression, clear the field, and then drag and drop the skills array from utility functions. Actually, we should probably do it from the edit fields node since that's where the data originates. This is a handy little strategy to use if you're working with a bigger workflow. You can just go ahead and go ahead and map to the earliest version of the data that you can. That way, if something goes weird and the data mutates later by means of a glitch or an AI agent or something of that nature, you'll be able to make sure this part is good. I see what we were doing wrong. So in this split out node, it actually needed to stay skills fixed. That way, when we refer to the split out skills node, and we wanted to map the JSON of the skills array with this expression right here, then it would actually map to JavaScript, Python, and N8n just the way we see right here. Skills, JavaScript, Python, N8n. All skills string. Okay, this is fun. Okay, so, let's say we wanted to map all of this data to a message that we were going to send through Slack or Telegram to alert our team that we just got a new lead. We might want to format that message using a combination of text and expressions, just like this. So user is, and we want to go back to the name from N8n selectors, and we also want to pull their age from the edit fields node. Good. Their best skill is so-and-so, their first project, which is now an all skills. So see, this is going to, and by the way, just to be sure, you need it to be in expression node for your expressions to match. See, if I switch it to field and then output it, see, it's just going to output all of our expressions and stuff as plain text. It's not actually going to map to the data. So you need to be paying very close attention to whether your stuff is, fixed or expression mode based on what it needs to be. Now, if we go ahead and hit execute step again, we should see, user Alice is 30, their best skill is Python, their first project was project A, which is now done. All skills, JavaScript, Python, and N8n. Okay, perfect. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that quick little lesson on how to write expressions. Honestly, it's not really going to affect your N8n career all that much, whether you know how to write them or not, because, as you've seen plenty of times just in this tutorial, you can just go into it and drag and drop from the schema view, whatever it is. But it is nice to know what's going on, and also very interesting if you're a technical sort of person. In any case, be sure to leave a like and share your thoughts with the class. And before you subscribe, make sure you know what you're doing, because it ain't easy being at the top. I'll see you guys next time.
Cutting through the blazing rain. Thunder rolling, but I ride the wave again. Deep tide rising, hear the echo call.